the owners of Dishonest Used Car Dealership, were not particularly business savvy, but they knew how to hop on market trends when they appeared. So, right around the time green tech started becoming a huge deal, we suddenly found ourselves rebranded as a cutting-edge, environmentally friendly dealership. This meant hybrids, biodiesel, and electric cars were suddenly part of our repertoire. Now, there's plenty of good stuff out there that markets itself as green. Unfortunately, there's also an awful lot of snake oil. One of our primary jobs in the service department was to test things like vegetable oil conversions and tiny electric cars to see what was good and what was trash. Or, more accurately, what we could pawn off on unsuspecting customers versus what was so obviously junk that no one in their right mind would ever buy it. This meant I did a lot of real-world testing on various terrible cars with various terrible aftermarket systems slapped onto them. As it turns out, the ultimate stress test is trying to take a horrible veggie oil-converted diesel Volvo on a date. It is guaranteed to break down mid-drive, and when it breaks down, it will absolutely blow a hot vegetable oil line. And that line will inevitably be the one running directly under the passenger seat, basting the poor woman you are trying to impress with hot yellow sludge salvage from a local Chinese restaurant. But that is a story for another day. Among the many cars of dubious quality in our new environmentally friendly inventory was the Xebra. Zebras were Chinese electric vehicles engineered to be as cheap, simple, and terrible as humanly possible. To completely bypass safety standards, they were technically classified as motorcycles. The Chingchi Motorcycle Company pulled off this engineering feat through one simple trick. They just left a wheel off the vehicle. That is right. These were three-wheelers, laid out like a Reliant Robin with one wheel in the front and two in the back. They had atrocious build quality, a 35-mile-per-hour top speed, began rusting the moment they left the assembly line, and were absolutely terrifying to drive. Imagine a slightly oversized tricycle with a flimsy steering wheel that bends under your grip, wrapped in a fiberglass body so thin you can practically see through it. Now imagine this tricycle is so poorly constructed that the manufacturer actively advises against driving in the rain because the electrical system will short out. That was a Xebra. Why on earth the owners paid to import a half-dozen of these things remains a mystery for the ages. Hardly any survived a single test drive before breaking down, and we could not get them out the door to save our lives. Colossal Redneck belched his way into my office on a gray spring morning and slammed his KFC grease palms onto my glass desk. I briefly considered spraying his entire body with Windex, but before I could, he launched right into his spiel. Lord Salisbury thinks he can swap out the throttle controller on one of them Zebras to get some more speed out of her. That sounds terrifying, I replied. Yeah, awesome, ain't it? I'm going to have him do it. A couple of hours later, a white Zebra pickup rolled out of the service bay featuring a brand new throttle controller under the bed. Lord Salisbury, one of my technicians, so named for his posh English accent, and a bottle of Bombay Sapphire hidden deep inside his toolbox, showed off his handiwork. Mounted under the bed was an aftermarket controller with two giant, thick cables snaking out of it. The throttle controller on an electric car is essentially a giant glorified potentiometer connected to the accelerator pedal. A higher amperage controller lets more juice through at full throttle, at the expense of devouring your batteries much faster. Of course, when the wiring inside the vehicle is made of cheap pot metal and insulated with despair, dumping 600 amps through it might not be the smartest idea. It is also generally unwise to boost the top speed of a vehicle whose main selling point was avoiding government crash tests altogether. So, the stock throttle controller is 300 amps. This one is 600, Lord Salisbury explained. What do you think it will do? I'm not entirely sure. I'm guessing it will do at least 45, which means it might actually keep up with traffic. Is that really a good idea? Lord Salisbury just shrugged. Colossal Redneck flashed his stupid, toothy grin. Come on, let's see if this piece of shit is any good. Against my better judgment, I reluctantly climbed into the passenger seat, and we whirred down the street. We must have looked ridiculous. Two large grown men crammed inside a three-wheeled sardine can, struggling to reach 25 miles per hour in a 45 zone. Around the corner from our shop was a massive hill. Our standard litmus test for whether these cars had any real power was whether they could climb this hill without grinding to a complete halt. For the very first time, a Zebra actually zoomed up the incline, never dropping below 10 miles per hour the entire way. You might laugh at 10 miles per hour, but most of these shit sandwiches would simply stall, leaving you to roll backward down the hill in shame. Simply reaching the top was an absolute miracle. Our typical test drive route involved going up the steep side, coasting down the gentle side, and returning to the shop via the ring road. Instead, Colossal Redneck pulled into an industrial park of the summit and whipped the three-wheeler around. "Let's see how fast we can get it going down the hill," he shouted. "Are you stupid? These things have no brakes." "Nah, if it gets going too fast, I'll just saw the wheel back and forth and it'll slow us down. It'll be fine." This was an astoundingly dumb idea, even by his standards. I protested for a solid minute before finally realizing, fuck it, I didn't have much to live for anyway. If I was going to die, at least this mode of suicide had a pretty good chance of being hilarious compared to any other option. Colossal Redneck pulled the car back onto the road once traffic cleared and paused right at the crest of the hill. This is going to be fucking awesome. He made the Mario Kart race start sound. Beep, beep, bing, and slammed the pedal directly into floorboards. It was not exactly neck-snapping acceleration, but as we rolled down the slope, momentum took over. Colossal Redneck began calling out our dashboard speed, like a test pilot, on an experimental supersonic flight. 20-25, 30-35. At around 35 miles per hour, the contraption developed a severe vibration somewhere in the front end. 38-40. The vehicle was now swaying violently back and forth. The tiny truck was thoroughly displeased with its downhill trajectory and was actively doing everything in its power to steer us towards safety, like into a tree or the back of a delivery van. Colossal Redneck frantically jerked the steering wheel back and forth, trying to keep us pointed roughly downhill. 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. By this point, the vibration had escalated from noticeable past worrying and straight into apocalyptic. The dashboard was rattling uncontrollably, and the entire assembly comprising the truck bed sounded as if it was about to clatter off onto the pavement. The thin piece of fiberglass that the factory optimistically labeled a passenger door was flexing so wildly I could see daylight flashing through the door seal. At 50 miles per hour, Colossal Redneck finally stabbed at the brakes. Even he was not insane enough to take this death trap up to highway speeds. I watched his foot stomp the pedal, bounce off, and pump it several times. He turned to me with expression hovering somewhere between utter shock and pure terror. That look told me everything I needed to know. The brakes were operating at peak Zebra efficiency, meaning we had absolutely none. At the bottom of the hill sat a T-intersection, and we were speeding down the vertical stem of the T. A few hundred yards directly ahead stood a solid concrete retaining wall, separating the roadway from a 20-foot drop-off straight into a junkyard. We were going to impact that wall, and only two outcomes were possible. Either we would be instantly compressed into a flaming cube of fiberglass and low-grade steel, or we would launch entirely over the barrier, sail gracefully through the air, and land on a pile of crushed Pontiacs. Despite the sheer panic inside the cabin, Colossal Redneck managed to yank the mechanical handbrake. Remarkably, it provided just enough drag to slow our descent. I watched the speedometer creep agonizingly downward towards slightly less lethal speeds, but it was not enough. As we hit the flat stretch approaching the intersection, the needle was still hovering well above 35 miles per hour. Colossal Redneck screamed at me to hold on and violently cranked the steering wheel to the left. Because of how the Zebra's front steering fork is engineered, past a certain angle, the wheel simply snaps instantly to full lock. That is precisely what happened. The car whipped sideways with a horrific bang, slamming my body hard against the door panel. I cannot say for certain if we went up on two wheels, but I would be shocked if we did not. We skidded wildly onto the main road, miraculously avoiding the concrete wall altogether. We coasted back to the shop in dead silence, the Zebra now emitting a high-pitched, agonizing squeal. Once inside the service bay, we tumbled out of the vehicle. I was just preparing to unleash a furious rant when Colossal Redneck cut me off with a loud, "Holy fucking shit! Look at this fucking thing! The wheel! Look at the goddamn wheel!" Sure enough, The front end of our land speed record vehicle had suffered a severe structural failure. The violent forces from our emergency turn at the bottom of the hill had bent the entire front fork assembly backward, jamming the front tire directly against the bodywork. Think about how terrifying that actually is. Modern cars are built remarkably tough. Short of a major collision or hitting a massive pothole at high speed, they can handle incredible abuse. Taking a corner at 35 miles per hour might feel fast, but you naturally expect the chassis to remain intact. Our turn at the intersection was aggressive, but nowhere near intense enough to collapse the front subframe on a normal automobile. Yet, here we were. We concluded the front frame was manufactured out of either aluminum foil or soft cheese. Naturally, we submitted the damage as a routine warranty claim to the manufacturer, somehow omitting any mention of our upgraded 600-amp controller or our high-speed downhill run. Colossal Redneck formally advised the owners that the Zebras were incapable of surviving anything beyond the gentlest possible driving, urging them to demand a full refund because the vehicles were fundamentally unsafe. Their response was classic management. Once it's out the door, who gives a shit? From that day forward, Colossal Redneck and I categorically refused ever step foot in a Zebra again. And in the end, we never managed to sell a single one.